Oh my gosh, hi.
Hi.
Hi, Jackie. Hello, everyone out there in the interwebs. Welcome to our fourth installment, I believe, of the New York City Poetry Festival streaming series. I'm Stephanie Berger. I'm CEO of the Poetry Society of New York.
Hi, I'm Jackie Brage. I'm the Programs Director of Poetry Society of New York.
So we've put this series together basically to try to capture some of the poetry community magic of the New York City Poetry Festival during this really, really weird time. We wanted to bring just like that sense of fun to the internet in this space. So thank you for watching. We're very excited. For those of you that don't know about the festival, the New York City Poetry Festival brings together hundreds of organizations in New York each summer on Governor's Island. Organizations it's first come, first serve, essentially, to participate, which makes it like the most inclusive poetry festival ever. It's free to participate. It's free to attend. It's 3 days and it's really fun and we love making it happen. We couldn't do it this year, which is why we are here and have brought together a handful of our headliners from what was supposed to be our 10th annual event this past summer. So we're so delighted to have Paul Muldoon, Deborah Landau, Ariana Reines, C.A. Conrad, Terrance Hayes. It's going to be an amazing event, and we're glad that you're here. Jackie, am I forgetting anything?
Well, it was pretty comprehensive.
It was comprehensive, right?
There was one thing. I know that times are very difficult and hard right now, but we are a small nonprofit. And since we were unable to host the festival this year, we are collecting donations for the festival next year, should anyone feel moved to donate. And we'll drop a link for that donation page later in the night. I think that was it.
I do think, actually, so I remembered one thing while you were talking. So while you're watching, if you find yourself with any questions for our readers, you're more than welcome to put your questions into the comments on Facebook, and we will do our best to answer them towards the end of this event. And if you experience any technical difficulties at all and you're really upset about it, or we do or something, this whole entire thing will be posted on Facebook afterwards, so you can watch everyone's readings later on as well. And I really do think that is it. So, Jackie, would you like to introduce our first reader?
I would be delighted.
Yay!
So our first poet tonight is the wonderful Deborah Landau. Deborah is the author of 4 books of poetry, most recently Soft Targets, which was the winner of the Believer Book Award, Uses of the Body, The Last Usable Hour, and Orchid Delirium. Her poems have appeared in The New Yorker, The Paris Review, Poetry, The American Poetry Review, The New York Times, and The Best American Poetry. You might have heard of some of those. And she was a 2016 Guggenheim Fellow. She's a professor and director of the creative writing program at New York University, and she lives in Brooklyn with her family.
Thank you. Thanks, Jackie and Stephanie, for inviting me to read with some of my favorite poets on the planet. And it'd be nice to be together on a summer evening on Governor's Island, but I guess this is like the second best thing to that, the Zoom room. All right, so I'll read some poems from my most recent book, Soft Targets, and then a couple new poems. And this book is a long linked lyric sequence. I'll read some fragments sort of strung together, pausing between, and as you'll hear, the book contends with the growing threats on this imperiled planet of ours, including gun violence and climate change and global terror, the threats to our democracy, and so on. Soft targets. I don't know what's so neo about neo-Nazis. They seem a lot like the old Nazis to me, shouting, "Jews will not replace us," in Charlottesville. In Frankfurt, marching by my grandmother's house, shouting pretty much the same. Ought we to get going now? Galloping seems a good idea. This is my plangent note to the ambassadors of love. All dreaming now is retroactive. The radioactive someday is here. Our kings are cranks, crooks, incongruous. They are improper, ill-equipped. How is it we push the handle out? How is it we push the handle down and they popped out, toasted? And now they sit at the head of our table. Can we be excused? Scurrilous scumbags, x-rays of greed. They move themselves up the flagpole, raising the trees. Comrades, commend yourselves on a job very poorly done. And now what will be? I'm alarmed. Keep your passport handy. Keep cash. Keep water and batteries. Collect your meds and loved ones just in case, and silence your phone. Stay off the beach, the street, the planet. There must be some mistake. And the doomsday clock flicks forward, stares us down. And what now of dreaming? We failed. The planet has published our failures. Our crimes are perpetual, methane and sweltering, arrogant and endless. Poor fucks we are, breathing mindlessly as the marsh grass floods. And here comes the supermoon again, like it's so special. Weak and disordered become the governments. Disquiet rules us now. Onward, I thought, and so we were obscured. The end of America. No one knew how to manage it, but we tried the typical ways of numbing pain. My daughter painted tiny flowers on her toenails. I mixed honey and vodka, squeezing in a lime, and we carried on with our breathing. My father was still alive. My body kept aging. The pills helped a little, not a lot. So I told the sky it should stay blue, told my daughter she should stay breathing, told my love he should, and we would, as the monster storms showed their teeth and the fires flared and the wines weren't plumb enough to numb us, and our leaders' virulent egos seethed, people dying off as if it were nothing to leave the planet, as if it were a breeze. Sybaritic afterlife, I don't crave you. I like daylight. I like crowds. I don't think it will be charming underground. The silence will be sudden, then last. What chic will shrink. There won't be any pretty pity. Will never peaches there or air will be so squashed and sour there. I don't want a cold place. Don't want a threadbare clamp and consequence all old. Our loneliness will be prolonged, then go too far. Oh, fuck, it's true. Then nothing left of you. Has it turned out we've wasted our time? We've wasted our time. Our magnificent bodies on the dissecting table, our day after tomorrow, our what to do now. The stink of us so undignified, the endgame of bloom. We'll lose the sun, struck and disassembled, lightly down and crawling like a worm. The earth, it is a banquet, and laid on its table we, a puncture in the wound room, crude and obvious. The raving lunatics, they are upon us, but we are raving too. Don't blame the wisteria for setting off a feeling like freedom, a feeling like joy. We watched the people walking in the open square. One of them was a specialist in killing, fear the way of others. I've seen the most extraordinary thing about people, their faces. Remember the trees in springtime, We ate candy beneath them. Shouts from the playground, static of yellow jackets, your fresh new haircut. Here's a tweeted canto, some words for the end of the world, for when I'm forever nothing, and you are, and you, and you, what we were for such a brief. And with the laundry, the dog at his bowl, the boys going at it out back. Oh, you who want to slaughter us, will be dead soon enough, what's the rush? And this our only world. Now, bring me a souvenir from the desecrated city. Something tender, something that might bloom. So I have 2 new poems, and maybe like many of you, it's been hard to write with all the pressure of the news and this pandemic business. So I made myself like a little assignment to write acrostic poems with skeleton down the left side of the margin. And so I have some skeleton acrostics, and here are 2 of them, and these will be the last poems I read. These are brand new. Skeletons. So whatever's the opposite of a Buddhist, that's what I am. Kind-hearted, yes, but knee-deep in existential gloom. Except when the fog smokes the bridges like this, like instead of being afraid, we might juice ourselves up, like might get kissed again. Dwelling in bones, I go straight through life, a kind of sublime abundance, cherries, dog's breath, the sun, then ouch, and all of us snuffed out. Dear one, what is waiting for us tonight? Nostalgia, the homes of childhood, oblivion, how we hate to go. Sundays I spend feeling sorry for myself. I've got a knack for it. I'm morbid, make the worst of any season, exclamation point. Yet levity's a liquor of sorts, lowers us through life toward the terminus soon extinguished. Darling, the comfort is slight. Tucked in bed, we search each other for some alternative. Oh, let's marvel at the world, the stroke and colors of it, now, while breathing. Thank you.
So good. Thank you so much, Deborah. Oh, I love those new poems.
Thank you.
Wow. I'm so happy we're doing this. I mean, it's like even when poetry is hard, it's so uplifting to me. So
yeah. Other people,
thank you.
Definitely.
Exactly. So thank you so much, Deborah. That was wonderful. I'm going to introduce our next reader, C.A. Conrad, whose latest book, Jupiter Alignment, Somatic Poetry Rituals, is forthcoming from Ignota Books in 2020. The author of 9 books of poetry and essays while standing in line for death, Wave Books won a Lambda Book Award. They also received a 2019 Creative Capital Grant, as well as the Pew Fellowship in the Arts, a Believer Magazine Book Award, and a Gil Ott Book Award. They regularly teach at Columbia University in New York City and the Sandberg Art Institute in Amsterdam. I am so excited to welcome C.A. Conrad.
Hi, C.A.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me. Deborah, that was a great reading. I'm a huge fan of soft targets. I really love that. Let me see. I'm going to share the screen. There. Does that fit on there? I hope. Okay. These are 3 new poems that are going to be in my new book that's coming out next year, called Amanda Paradise. Only in stacking books can the tree feel its weight again. I am so fucking sick of nations and the men who love them. The number of suicides this afternoon hiding in bottom of a cup. I feel feral out here. Found a man who likes me like that. Found a man who lives the way I do. 7 years on the road anniversary soon. You only have to destroy yourself for love until it is normal, which makes love normal, and refuse to live a day without it, an inferno of it. At 16, sleeping with my mother's boyfriend, I was overwhelmed with it. Solids form around you until you struggle no more beneath it. Feel throat open in a word, naming new stars moving across the ceiling from the disco ball. Constellations with stories to soften hardened hearts. We finished the night reading poetry out loud. Last night, Erica Kaufman's mind-blowing post-classic, Poetry and Love sure know how to hang a welcome sign out, measure and transmit from the pink and adorable telemetry. No more waiting between parentheses. We now excel in the ether while holding hands. Acclimating to discomfort of the system breaking beneath us. I do not take any calls except from the century we are in. When there is no Bible in my hotel room, it makes me sad to have no place to put my filthy poems for future guests. It is important to let them know everyone should burn with abandon as soon as the heat is available. Be a self-styled alarm clock no one can shut off. Be the storm love places in someone's home. Are you sure we can handle this? Because I am absolutely certain. Come on, Wynn, knock us around. We are a tide that cures ills. Look at us in the mirror. As soon as the invented language enters us, something else will vibrate in our skin. Opening door with teeth of the future to the place where we let the freer feeling go. When you told me you had been looking for me, we pressed through every invisible barrier between us. I watched you gently let the gods know you were ready to win the lottery. There were people from the 19th century alive in my lifetime many years ago. I met some of them. They are all gone now, as we hold on to the side of one another, howling down the velocity of seconds. Visit a living being to eat what falls from their body. I am the wagon wishing you would find me, a maple left uncut. The rock that smashes nothing, seeking a God who speaks to memories of life before the heart's affliction. Your cum tastes like hand sanitizer. What have you been up to? When too many die, we deceive despair with love. Sex with a man at a funeral, destroying death in his car, a holy perforation for a ghost. For best wish, catch apple as it falls. Eat seeds and worm to seal your destiny. Everyone puts what they've got into the wheel. Driving across America, raw imagination, faster than spirits keep up. I cannot remember the last day a digital watch was the only digital object in my life. The first heart transplant was the last day everyone alive had hearts we were born with. Something to get used to. I was only 1 year old, but do not remember anyone objecting to someone keeping their strength with someone else's muscle. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my God, thank you so much for being here.
Hey,
So great. Jackie, do you remember when we were having that editorial meeting the other day and Jane was like, ew, Stephanie hates shape poems. That is not true. I'd like to amend anything that I've ever said about shape poems previously. Steve Conrad's shape poems are absolutely incredible. Thank you, CA. That was delightful.
so much.
And dirty, and the birds.
I want to take a breather, but I feel like we have to introduce the next poet, right?
We just have to keep going, yeah, because we have so much good stuff, and I want to include as much as possible. So let's do it.
Okay, next up we have Paul Muldoon. Paul is an Irish poet and professor of poetry, as well as an editor, critic, playwright, lyricist, translator, all-around wonderful human. Muldoon is the author of 13 major collections of poetry, including Frolic and Detour, 1,000 Things Worth Knowing, Maggot, Horse Latitudes, Moist Sand and Gravel, Hay, The Annals of Chile, Matic, A Mystery, Meeting the British, Quoof, Why Brownlee Left, Mules, and New Weather. Among his awards are the 1972 Eric Gregory Award, the 1994 TS Eliot Prize, the 1997 Irish Times Poetry Prize, the 2003 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry, the 2003 Griffin International Prize for Excellence in Poetry, the 2004 American Ireland Fund Literary Award, the 2004 Shakespeare Prize, the 2006 European Poetry Prize, the 2015 Pigott Poetry Prize, 2017 Spirit of Ireland Award from the Irish Arts Center. Oh my God, the list just goes on and on and on.
It's a really impressive resume, really impressive. I have to admit. Almost intimidating.
Yeah. Muldoon served as professor of poetry at Oxford University from 1999 to 2004 and as poetry editor of The New Yorker from 2007 to 2017. Yes. He has taught at Princeton University since '87 and currently occupies the Howard G.B. Clark 21 Chair in Humanities. Hi, Paul.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, Paul. We're so happy you're here.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much for having me. Where to begin? You know, I'm going to begin with a new poem. It's a political poem. I suppose that all poems are political. Some are more political than others. It's called The Plumber. Even John Smith knew. People of some social standing called it the loo instead of the head. Even Stuyvesant knew it made sense to come down hard on the Jews to gain a little street cred. It was known even to Cotton Mather, a witch could speak quite openly rather than be taken to the woodshed. We suppose the police aren't still lining up to blot their far from clean police blotter. We have to believe a cop won't be absolved of sin because he's wearing a badge of tin. We suppose the plumber works mostly in lead when he works mostly in water. We suppose the plumber works mostly in lead when his medium is mostly water. Even Khrushchev knew he could drive home more points with his shoe than a thermonuclear warhead. Even McCarthy knew the all too loquacious Sioux were better dead than red. It was known even to Hedda Hopper. The White House was the home of a whopper that was always served on white bread. We suppose the impious imp cannot in good faith give himself an imprimatur. We have to believe we won't be taking it on the chin because of the color of our skin. We suppose the plumber works mostly in lead when he works mostly in water. We suppose the plumber works mostly in lead when his medium is mostly water. Even the unprincipled Wheeler knows what Lawrence Peter says goes for almost every agency head. Even Bill Barr knows the mercury in the barometer shows he's hanging on by a thread. It's known even to Mitch McConnell, the cuckoo's more than Ava Fonnell and can push a grown man out of bed. We suppose that even when it's run by a tiny tot, the state most likely won't totter. We have to believe we might still win, if only because the system is wearing thin. We suppose the plumber works mostly in lead when he works mostly in water. We suppose the plumber works mostly in lead when his medium is mostly water. A couple of short little imagistic poems. This first one is called Chipmunk. It's so short. I mean, it's so short that one can imagine indeed a composer setting it one of these days. As you know, composers, many of my friends are composers, as they say, love short poems. Chipmunk. Ain't that God's own truth? Just one more flame-streaked roadster, fresh from the spray booth. It's the time of year the chipmunks are putting lots of little nuts in their pantries. This one's called Cow Moose. It's set in Vermont. I don't suppose anyone in their right mind even sets out to write a poem about a moose, given the great Elizabeth Bishop's foray into moose-dom. However, I'm sure, like many of the poets here this evening, I don't actually set out to do anything much on the poetry front. I wait around and see what happens. So I should have known better, but what could I do? Cow Moose, Route 125, Ripton, Vermont. A throwback to 1966, what with the Vidal Sassoon bob cut fringe, trademarked by Mary Quant, and her coming into her own only at dusk to binge on water lilies in a sunken discotheque. Though you may have her pegged as a wuss, she has scant regard for the predations of bear or coy dog, ranging out across the muskeg to strip a dozen willow trees of their pain-killing bark and shoots. Some nights she's got up in hot pants, others a kind of knitted mohair mini dress, set off by platform boots. And I think I will read two more, if I may, a short poem called The Banisters, which began with an image of, or a description somewhere of rifle stocks being made from banisters. So I began to think about the various repurposings of bits and pieces of the world, particularly around houses, that are put to war, I suppose, put to use in war. The banisters are ornamental gates and railings that were melted down for rifle barrels, have gained some sort of posthumous renown by unambiguously drawing a line in the sand. The gates and railings are finally taking a firm stand and even more emphatically bringing things to a close. The exit wound is their approximation of a rose or a geranium under gauze on the windowsill. Gangrene, the green and gold of the first full-blown daffodil. Also rendered, so it would even more tellingly rend, was lead stripped from the gutters and flashing. For lead will bend along a spine as it did along a walnut ridge post. What was once an outer sanctum is now the innermost. Shouldered as rifle stocks after a mere 3 weeks of drill, the banisters are gradually taking another hill. And I'll end with a little poem that alludes to that one of my favorite quotations from Thoreau. We do not ride on the railroad, it rides upon us. Did you ever think what those sleepers are that underlie the railroad? Each one is a man, an Irishman, or a Yankee man. The rails are laid on them and they are covered with sand, and the cars run smoothly over them. They're sound sleepers, I assure you. And every few years, a new lot is laid down and run over, so that if some have the pleasure of riding on a rail, others have the misfortune to be ridden upon. So I'll end with this, the writers. Thank you very much indeed for having me this evening. What a joy to be in the poetry world. The writers. Some sigh for those 9 bean rows, some the heavenly abode. Some sigh for the binary, some the binary code. Some load a hermaphrodite brig with a cargo of tin. Some ride with Quanah Parker, some ride against the wind. And those of us who've ridden the white horse in our own expeditionary force, now weep that history must run its course. Now weep that history must run its course. Some sigh for the Cafe d'Alsace, some for telling it slant. Some sigh for brave Ulysses, some Ulysses S. Grant. Some can't believe that you're for real. I think I've got you sussed. Some ride upon the railroad. For some, it rides on us. And those of us who've ridden the white horse in our own expeditionary force now weep that history must run its course. Now weep that history must run its course. Some still sigh for Art Blakey, some sigh for how he rolled. Some sigh for Acapulco, some Acapulco gold. Some hold a piercing in their tongue, some a burning coal. Some ride in on a donkey, some ride out on a pole. And those of us who've ridden the white horse in our own expeditionary force now weep that history must run its course. Now weep that history must run its course.
Thank you. Paul, thank you so much for being here. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
That felt very, very beautifully and horribly fitting for tonight, 30 minutes before vice presidential debate.
It did indeed. Oh, yeah. We're 30 minutes out. This is
Yeah.
I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we're doing this, and this is our countdown to
support group for
that.
Watching history run its course.
Exactly. I'm thrilled to introduce our next poet, Ariana Reines. I'm just so delighted she is here. Ariana is a poet and Obie-winning playwright, performing artist, and translator, born in Salem, Massachusetts, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Her books of poetry include The Cow, Coeur de Lion, Mercury, The Origin of the World, a play, Telephone, and most recently, a sandbook, winner of the 2020 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award and longlister for the 2019 National Book Award. She has taught poetry at Columbia University, the European Graduate School, NYU, Tufts, Naropa, the New School, Yale, and many other institutions, big and small. She's also a wonderful astrologer. In 2009, she was the Roberta C. Holloway Lecturer in Poetry at the University of California, Berkeley. I'm so excited that Ariana Reines is here to read us some poems. Thank goodness. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for having us. Thanks to everyone for being here. I pray that this inoculates us all from every form of derangement, physical, mental, spiritual, and otherwise. I feel resurrected by the readings that I've gotten to hear so far, and I'm just going to read for you one poem. It's kind of a vicious, furious rant. I wrote it a few weeks ago on the new moon for the Jewish New Year, and it's presided over by the Kavan Sheila Negig from Ireland. So it's a little bit of a, well, we'll see. I'm just gonna read you a rant, okay? Hang on a second. Just disappeared from view. Uh-oh. Sorry, you guys. All right, here we go. No, actually, the first word emerged deep in the bowels of the human throat, and forged in longing and envy has now attained majority, and like a Christ is rising, gagging, pointing to its second wound, the better to distract me. All my life you've taught me to mourn the sun. Never mind that this isn't even my religion. Then after stealing my children, you hacked away my reproductive organs. You never believed me capable of grief on behalf of my own immensity, and caused to orbit all about my head the mouths of those white women rich enough to fatten their lips with silicone, and bade them shape woken syllables on the accumulating apps of your fortune. Natural beauty dies the deaths you innovated for it. It was catastrophe you wanted, for only catastrophe could arouse you now. Me and my sisters, slick in the semen of your eye. And even at this late date, I was astonished to find that for all that, you'd left my throat intact. Having recourse now only to gagging, we realized in horror in the midst of our protest that we were still causing you pleasure. The gigantic, endlessly whipped mysticism of women is the single most misunderstood phenomenon in the universe, I almost wrote, preceding the original man. We fasted but could not starve it, corseted it, shat out babies and gave them suck, lost our will to live, stayed in bed with the soaps, or burned ourselves on the pyre of your psychedelic awakening and your sexual revolution, after which, pregnant and needing to make a living, we decanted our pussy into strenuous yogas and increased purchasing power, mindfully causing gentle kales and gem lettuces to revolve in your guts. And our every feeling now the fodder for a robot that would better understand how to bring you joy, a joy you would perfect just a few days after our death in the polyps and viscera of a pain you will never understand. It took you all of 15 seconds to come inside us, and still we believed there was hope for you, Meister Bluebeard, Lord Google, Father Time, the balding egg of your skull, brined in celestial juice. What? It's just a cup of honey. What? It's only money. What a stupid situation in which to be becoming more and more beautiful. Look, I didn't make the law, plumped and slick with spit. I'm stuck in the same prison you are, seeing my way around you like a solitary citizen squinting around the girth of the Bastille. So high you can't get over it, like the taut belly of a pierpont. So low you can't get under it, polished cue ball, drum skin she gonna blow. When the planet rises to the level of its mothers, pleasure will have a new name. It will no longer be this bastard you. It will no longer recognize my lord you. Sea boiling with drowning men. Estrella del Mar, when the tip of my tail split in two, I bled. You told me I had the right to remain silent. I have just received unsolicited pics of myself as a girl. They were sent by a woman who once babysat me. On one, I find the unmistakable look of lechery on my fat, Jewish little face. The second I see it, this look becomes a book and flies up before I can stop it into my scar to nest there with all the self-importance of a plump little rook settling its feathers under itself in the attitude of, it's a fact, bitch. Copulation brought me into this world. Sex is apparently the self-same power my culture still cannot comprehend, blaming the parody of inner knowing that is the weeping eye of your dick on us. What a bore. Tituba, 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 the Puritan gallstone has not passed. The scarlet letter is unredeemed. No, sir. No, sire. I was attracted to what you're calling the sacred because it was trash. And you are the man who trashed it. And because it could be accessed online free of charge and without initiation, and because I too was the refuse of this world, monopolizing only profit, you collectivized your true wage, the shame, consternation, and self-disgust proper to you has washed up at my door. Your wage, your wage, your wage. Asshole, I have come here to return to you your wage.
Oh my God. Thank you for ranting. It makes me feel better about being alive. So that's like high praise, right? I mean,
I love this poetry reading the most.
I think this might be the best poetry reading ever. I'm not trying to like hyperbolize either. It's just these are my favorite poets. I'm overwhelmed. So
I also hate receiving unsolicited childhood pictures. That's like when that happens so much.
it's so triggering. Anyways, let's talk to Terrance.
Okay. So yeah, last, can't believe it's last already, but absolutely not least, is the lovely Terrance Hayes. Terrance is the author of 6 collections of poetry. Most recently and really wonderful is American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin, which was a finalist for the National Book Award, National Book Critics Circle Award, and the TS Eliot Prize. How to Be Drawn, Lighthead, which was the winner of the 2010 National Book Award for Poetry, Muscular Music, which was the recipient of the Kate Tufts Discovery Award, Hip Logic, winner of the 2001 National Poetry Series, and Wind in a Box. His prose collection, To Float in the Space Between, Drawings and Essays in Conversation with Etheridge Knight, was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award and winner of the Pegasus Award for Poetry Criticism. Hayes has received fellowships from the MacArthur Foundation, the Guggenheim Foundation, and the Whiting Foundation, and is a professor of English at NYU. Hi, Terrance. Oh.
Yay.
Hey, everybody, can y'all hear me?
Yep.
We sure can.
Really, hold up, let me see if I can get this thing to get a little louder. Oh, here we go. Okay, can you hear me? Yeah? I don't know, I don't hear anybody. Can y'all hear me over there? All right, look.
I can totally hear you, Terrance. You sound amazing.
Okay, great. I'm double tasking here. I'm on into a class. This is what happens in this world we're living in. So the first thing, since I have 10 minutes, I have a poem that I want to read you. I'm going to try to like play some music or something in the background so you can hear the relationship between those two things. But the class that I'm talking to, they're still sitting here. So the first thing I'm going to read is something that I didn't get a chance to read to them because I was juggling all of this time. So I'm essentially going to read y'all 2 poems tonight, essentially. So the first one, let me see if I can set this thing up behind my camera. As I was sort of telling the folks that are already here, I have kind of had this assignment to do this poem on the Negro Act of 1740. And I struggled with it for about a month or 2 before I decided to just see if I can make it one long sentence. So that's what you have here. Y'all won't get to see it, but the folks that are listening to me talking are getting to see it. And the name of it is A Guzzled Sentence After My People Hold On by Eddie Kendricks and the Negro Act of 1740. And now as I say that, I'm like, maybe I should try to play that Eddie Kendricks too. Maybe I should do that. And then I'll play. So we're just going to have some music. This is picking up on something that I was also talking about with the group, which is just trying to do something interesting with this current format that we're in. I mean, it's really a challenge to, hold up. It's really a challenge to find ways to still connect with people, find ways to still be, intimate with you through these times and through this process. So what I've been doing is various kinds of production experiments, I guess I would call it. So with this one, the poem that I wrote eventually, it's a guzzle, it's one long sentence, and I was just doing this thing about people. So the Negro Act of 1740, and it would be moving, was a law after there was a revolt in 1739 down in South Carolina, where I'm from, near Charleston. A bunch of Africans, they killed a bunch of people, they ultimately got killed. But the next year, they came up with this law to say that, Black people were property, that they could not read, they couldn't earn their own money, they couldn't congregate without like a white person being around them. And from 1740 till 1865, that law was in place. So obviously there were exceptions, people were sort of sneaking around, but essentially it was illegal to learn and to think. Then it became the Jim Crow law and these other kind of manifestations. So I sort of took that as my subject. And what I have here is the poem that I'm gonna read to you, and then I'll read you this other one. But what's in the background, what I was just sort of listening to as I was working on it, and now you get to hear, is this Eddie Kendricks, My People. So let's see if it'll play while we listen to it. A Guzzled Sentence After My People Hold On by Eddie Kendricks and the Negro Act of 1740. Wherein a particular people is allowed to make slaves of people after the 1739 revolt, where people convinced tools useful in implementing their people's freedom had been stolen from them, pursued people to a river shallow enough for people to cross on horseback. And some of the people leapt into the river, kicking their legs like people on the riverbank, kicking the legs of the horses and the people on the horses, while some people managed to briefly evade retrieval by people who could not see the people they pursued could not be retrieved people, because your body belongs to you, and certainly not to the kind of people who devised laws to make properties of people after the people at the river were captured, their heads put on stakes along the road, and people who briefly eluded pursuit before being recouped or returned to people so afraid of working for themselves, they made it illegal for other people to work for themselves, grow their own food, congregate, and educate themselves without say-so of the kind of people who come after people pursuing freedom for their people while pursuing freedom for the people who come after their people. Experiment. That sounded like that was too loud. Okay. There's that poem that I just want to share, again, talking about some of the stuff I'm trying to do in these times. But this is the one I wanted to read you. So this poem, Coffin for Head of State, it's in Lighthead, and I've never read it because I just never had, the Fela Kuti in the background. And, since we get ready to get this debate going, I think I'm gonna read it in the spirit of like, what's going on. Okay. Coffin for Head of State. Inside the coffin was a tomb. Inside the mouth of the bullhorn was a tomb. Inside the stems of the violets, tombs. Inside the thin blue shawl of the afternoon and of the dusk, inside the words awe, freedom, territory, fatigue. In one village, I came to a woman shaped like a bird and was given a knife as long as a feather. In another, a woman spit a curse to break me like an egg, its sweetness running between my fingers like something the body makes. I was born in the year of the war between wars. I was born to a religion I thought could not hold me ransom, to sermons walking on the back of the wind. I was pulled from death's pocket and cradled in its hand. My father was the sunlight now, but I couldn't understand a word he sang. His teeth were removed and tossed glittering along the tracks of the trains. I was quiet as the indicted. I myself was the music I lacked. In each village, when I tried to tell them I was American, amen, amen, amen spilled like ash from my mouth, and they knew what it meant. Everywhere I was made to dance like a man carrying his head before they cast me out. To be holy, to be united, to be untied. Could I ask or answer you, I would be three things at once, I said to the coffin. To be uneyed, unheavied, and alive, I said. To be the light on all the disappearing words, to be burning and washed away, to be lit inside. I walked, I walked, I walked. I was not noble, heroic, compassionate, holding the shadow of a name in the world. I'd seen the scalp scorched by the way things used to be, including the smoke rising from the mind like a wing, including the hair burned of its ability to dream. I carried a child's imagination, the uses of money, the philosophies of grace, the paradoxes of revenge. I carried a prayer book with words as small as the screws in the glasses of the blind. I carried bad, 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 bad things, and the weight made my teeth ache. For Jesus Christ our Lord, for the grace of the Almighty Lord, for the wound and the bitter spit of the accused, for the scar resting against my wrist for the rest of my life. Because what I feared was in me was in me. I wanted to lie still in the body like a knife. What I liked about its weight was what I liked about the sky, as red at the beginning of the day as it was at the end. The gravity that was history or guilt, the darkness that was smoke or cloud, the burning that was washed away. In one village, vultures clapped their beaks at me. They clapped their wings like the silly flags of Providence, twisting against themselves. The body was soft. The body was what I bore. The body was what I ate. Inside the red of a feeling, and irrevocably so. Inside the blood, inside the yoke, which is a warning. Inside the ghost, in the field of oaths and conviction, the contracts of the state going busy and busying the breath. Their eyes basked in the aesthetics of whatever blindness calls itself. I almost described the leaves shining on their bones and the snakes roosting in their sheaths to the coffin, and the valley where all the headstones were smoldering. But there was nothing left to be said, and so I said it again and again. I carried it on my back like a man with one wing. I carried it against my chest like a door with no housing, with the blood, which was its contrition, with the iron, which was its name, with the hunger, which was its belonging. I was born with my fingers on the latch of a coffin, hot with the sunlight spilling on its face, locked like a window in a building on fire. For Jesus Christ our Lord, or against him, for grace of the Almighty. My coffin, the moth house, my coffin with no message or lover, my coffin cooled by stars spilling on its face, my coffin, the mouth. My body could have fit inside its body and drifted downstream to the center of the earth. After my mother sang the only hymn she knew, she tore her black dress open the way one tears a scab from its address, and I saw the skinny knife she kept hidden between her breasts. I am not in the village filled with the prophets. I am feeling elegiac for our cataclysms, the blood in the yolk when the egg breaks, the grief stripped of its shell. I am filled with the hollowness of holiness and breath. I am inside the village, reddened by readiness. inside the word tear and tear and fatigue, inside the terror which makes territory evaporate, where the sunlight braiding my scalp is on my mind. He dead, yeah, now, the villagers sang when I tried to tell them I was alive. He dead, yeah, now, the villagers sang as I carried my coffin toward them. He dead, yeah, now, the villagers sang as I carried it away.
Oh my God, thank you, Terrance. I'm excited about jumping into the Q&A because I have a lot of things that I want to talk to you about now.
I'm gonna try to get both these screens going.
Okay. Sounds good. God, I feel like Terrance is just like crazy good at writing poetry. Jackie, would you agree? I mean, he's just like,
Yeah, I feel kind of just speechless from everyone's readings tonight, which is kind of problematic for someone hosting a event. The words will come.
So here we are.
Are we three talking? What's the Q&A situation?
We're actually gonna add everybody back in. Let's bring everyone into this conversation.
So I'm just gonna be in and out on mute so I can talk to these guys, so I can let them get out of here, and then we'll finish up. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. So
Hi everyone.
Everyone. Welcome back. I guess Terrance's reading just got me thinking, like, all of you, I have so much respect for you as poets and as thinkers, and I feel like I'm almost inclined to ask each of you for some like sort of wisdom about like where we are, and I wonder like how you feel about like being a poet and writing all of this work that is filled with so much like wonderful thinking about where we are and what it means to you to be a person that people look to for wisdom about the situation that we find ourselves in. Is that it? Like a really intense question to start off with?
Or just what it means to be an artist during a time like this. I feel like that's related, right? Like,
yeah,
what is the responsibility of the artist?
Should we just jump in with this, any of us? I don't know.
Sorry, I should direct it to someone. CA, why don't you start us off?
Well, I think the people who are in trouble are the people who are not being creative. I mean, that's the real issue, right? I mean, those who are being creative every day, we're the ones who are going to see the solutions to get out of these problems. I mean, that's just a fact. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Ariana, do you have something you want to add besides that snap?
I'm always here to heckle and snap. I think that I think that those of us who have a practice of writing poetry are very lucky because it's an art that looks like almost nothing. It requires very little money in order to practice this art. You need almost no equipment. And although it does seem to thrive in spaces where conversation and affection and a certain less materialistic outlook about the joys that life has to offer, it does seem to thrive in spaces like that. But I think I do feel like, unfortunately, the worse things get for people, the more they seem to be discovering this art and the gifts that it can offer. You can be a total fuck up, a complete nincompoop, and an utter catastrophe of a person like me, and, and still be granted some shape for your life, some rhythm, some access to beauty that you wouldn't otherwise deserve or be able to attain.
I think that's a wonderful answer. I feel like that's where I was like going with it almost. It's just like I feel like there's so much about these poems that you've read tonight that like teach people how to live. And I'm glad that you all are doing that, or engaging in this practice of art that CA mentions, because I feel like, it helps, and it helps us create a better world. So we do have a question from Adrienne. It's for Terrance, but I feel like we could discuss it. Do you conduct a lot of research for your writing?
Because I'm going to answer that. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
I saw this come up. Oh, you waiting on my answer now?
Yeah.
The thing is, as I have been saying this afternoon, is I just sort of think, I do whatever I can. So research keeps me busy, so I will do it. In the long sentence poem I read, the Guzzle poem, I did a lot of research because it's based on a historical fact. The 1740 phenomenon where they said Black people were property and couldn't educate themselves. But the thing I was mostly interested in is like, could I get it in one sentence? So I worked on that sentence for about a month once I did the research. But I'm really, trying to get away from any kind of like, I'm hoping the research leads to other things. The research is more of a door than a destination. So even in that poem, the thing that I was asked to write that poem for, I kind of was thinking, I think I did the wrong thing. I don't know if I actually did what they wanted, but I would say, I got a poem out of it. And I spent a month working on a sentence. That's a pretty good way to pass the time. So research is just all kind of contributes to that generative process. But whatever it takes to get the poems going is really, that's it. Whatever makes the poem go is what I'll do.
Awesome. Do others of you conduct research for like a particular poem? Is that something that you do?
My research would be living and feeling and thinking and reading from people.
Yes, I think with every poem I write, actually with every word that I stumble upon or that stumbles upon me, I find that I have to do some research on it. For some reason, I have become less and less. I was never that sure of what I was doing, but I'm less and less sure of what I'm doing. I'm less and less sure of what words mean. And I realize that I have misunderstood things so often that I almost check the meaning of every word that sort of comes across the radar. And check. I mean, I'm afraid I spent a lot of my time Googling this and that. Such a wide range of Googlings, I believe that there must be the technical term for that. But megalogoogling, anyway. I've often thought that I don't really get very many follow-ups, I think, from advertisers, because I don't think they know where to begin. They wouldn't know what my areas of interest are. But, to go back, perhaps someone else wants to talk about that. I was thinking earlier, about the times that are in it, and it's such a complex question, and the answer doesn't come easily. I suppose at some level, I'll just be devil's advocate, I suppose it's unfortunate that people look to poets at all for answers. Just going to throw that out there. It's not that, our poems are, as someone once said, answers to questions that only they have raised. That's one kind of question and one kind of answer. I mean, the people we should be looking to for guidance in our present crisis. I mean, I could say more about that too. This happens to be a crisis that has been a feature of every century of human existence. We happen not to have seen it for a century. In any case, the people who should be giving us guidance there are, among them would be Dr. Fauci, who's doing a very good job. But most other people who should be in charge are not doing a very good job. So in terms of understanding how to live our lives, our responsibilities, I think, are to make good poems. And in the midst of that, one might stumble upon something, to use that phrase again, that brings some slight revelation. But anyway, I'm talking too much. Forgive me.
I feel free to talk away, Paul. Yeah, definitely not trying to objectify you for your voice or anything, but the voice also helps with the communication of information. Yeah.
Taylor Bell has a really great question, I think. Taylor asks, how much time is appropriate to set aside to let politics occupy your day? At what point does it become unproductive to be consumed by anger and toxic obsession? And my favorite part, how do you keep that anger productive? I would love to have an answer to that question.
And I love that question because it's absurd. like I have a clock that's like, oh, ding, ding, ding. Like I've reached my coffee limit for today. Like guess I'll do some blood. I would love that, but I would probably be in a different line of work if I had that sort of skill. I guess I just wanted to jump in and say what do you mean productive? We're poets. We're not productive people. I mean, I don't know. I love the question because I resonate with it. I'm actually trying to be loving. I think that we all have unmanageable, undomesticatable things that we feel about reality, and it won't fit inside, and you can't quite if it did fit inside, you wouldn't need to be a poet. You could go do something useful, for God's sakes.
Yeah, I feel that could be a whole other hour event talking about productivity and what that really means, especially for a group of poets.
But I feel like anger is usually, essentially what anger is you're being blocked in some way. You want something and you can't get it, for whatever reason. And acknowledging that and recognizing what you want that you're not getting in that moment, I think is a really fruitful place for poetry. No matter what it is, even if it's just you're pissed and you're in traffic because you can't get where you want to go. Well, why am I so angry about that? That's a good place to start for a poem. Anger is it's an emotion that signals something important or intense, sort of in a deep-seated way, I think. What do you think, Terrance?
I think, you're just trying to keep records of things. So I was generally thinking about even subject with poems. I think usually when I'm inside of a poem, I'm just thinking about poetry. So even the notion of anger, you just hope that it's got some volume to it or you're trying to bring some shape to it. So if you think about the principle of the sonnet and the volta, it's just that turn. It means if you go into the poem angry, at some point you're going to have to change your mind. And so I like that idea of some kind of turn, because that's where the shape comes. So yeah, anger is a good starting place. But if you start angry and you end angry, I would be well, what are you doing there? So you're hoping to make something more of it, even if it was joy, even if you went to a poem extremely happy, I would still say, I hope you're gonna like make it more than just that, because again, in the spirit of poems just being about poetry, like, can a poem just be about anger? Can it just be about joy? Can it just be about love? So recording it will get you to kind of give it some more shape than what it is when we just have it in our heart or in our head, I think.
Can I jump in again?
Yeah, please.
It's so interesting because like so often poems that are like feel joyfully filled with the poetryness of poetry may come across with a certain emotional cast, anger, sadness, or whatever. But we who practice this art also know the joy of doing it, I suppose, as well. So there's something that you were saying, Terrance, about the Volta that also made me think about movement and transportation, that there's this way that somehow this strange art is also some kind of a vehicle, like it takes us somewhere. And often a poem that seems political or that seems angry or that even seems productive, it's actually something more mysterious or something. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like sometimes the things that stimulate us into the space of the poem are like a weird asynchrony, or even something that's not even dramatic or a big deal. It's just a strange roughness that somehow gets you into the room, and the next thing you know, you're somewhere else. And so I'm also, I guess I find myself distrustful, like maybe I seem like an angry feminist poet, but I feel like I'm sort of wallowing in the beautiful art, like I'm like Ferdinand the Bull smelling flowers, but it may not look like that. Do you guys have that experience of like?
Oh, yes. I know exactly what you mean. Deborah, will you tell us about your experience of just wallowing in the floral beauty of all of it?
The term toxic obsession, that rings a bell. To be alive, right? There's a lot going on and there's a lot of pressure and it's distracting, but I guess I feel like we're lucky we get to make something out of what we're feeling and witnessing, and that there's a satisfaction in that. And there's pleasure in that in terms of language and what language can do and the connections that it can make with other people. But in terms of solutions and wisdom, I have none, really.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I jump in about this whole idea of anger?
Yes.
First of all, I'm a poet. I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm not interested in being one. So that's all I have to say about that. But also, you know, I was thinking about how I read this book when I was a teenager by Mayakovsky called How Verses Are Made. And there was this line in the book that was very confusing where he said that at their root, all poetry is tendentious. I was like, I don't know. I've heard a lot of poetry that's kind of boring. I don't disagree. I don't really agree. And then a few years later, when I'm like 18, Amiri Baraka comes to read in Philadelphia with Etheridge Knight. And Amiri Baraka said the same thing. He said, all poems are political. And I was glad I got to talk to him about this, because the idea that Mayakovsky and Baraka both had is that the very act of writing a poem, doesn't matter if you're writing about a field of lilies or whatever, that is what separates you from these acceptable, respectable paradigms. So I think that the idea of being political, every poem is political in that sense, and I do agree. It took me a while to get there. I mean, I wasn't like sure about it at first, but when you heard Amiri Baraka explain it, it made so much sense.
And then just to pick that up, you know, part of that same notion, I think, is the notion that the poem is less something that gives us salve and succor, but more likely something that troubles us, something that disturbs us. And I always feel a bit bad these days, actually, because I hear again and again talk of, is there a poem for this moment that brings some sort of comfort to people? And I'm afraid I fear that people who think in those terms actually haven't read very much poetry, and are perhaps looking in the wrong place. They're looking to poets in the way that they should be looking to politicians for other answers, in the way they used to look to priests and pastors, and perhaps do less these days. And, I always find it fascinating that so much is asked of poets. Most of the time, nobody pays any attention whatsoever to us, quite rightly in some ways. And then we're asked to solve the problems of society. And what's fascinating about that is that nobody ever asks a novelist to do that. I mean, why aren't the novelists asked to do that?
Because they're not interesting.
Nobody asks playwrights to do that. Nobody asks film directors to do that. A few pop stars present themselves.
I feel like Aaron Sorkin probably gets asked if he'll run for president sometimes, right? Just because of the West Wing. Is that a thing?
What do you say?
I was saying I feel like Aaron Sorkin must get asked to run for president sometimes just because of the West Wing. Like people see it and they're like, that. I don't know.
Well, it is all theater.
Yeah.
Do you think they ask us to solve the problems of the world because we basically survive on nothing and they don't, and it's just like, how are you even here? Like, are you like, you're like a cockroach or something? Why aren't you dead yet? We've been trying to kill you for, eons. And
Oh my God. Ariana hit it.
The people that ask us don't think of it this way, but just to pick up on that idea, it is because that's, it's what we mostly do. Like, I do think poetry is problem solving. I mean, maybe novelists think that too, but when you're in the midst of it, you are solving things. So what I say to my students is that's just really good exercise for the problems that you will meet elsewhere. So I do think on some level, they don't mean it that way for us, but there's something about like the practice of poetry, solving problems, shapely thinking, thinking that a thought has 6 sides to it as opposed to 2. All of that stuff is like inherently people do know we are the keepers of the word. But everybody has it, so it's really hard for people to think that that means something if we carry a tool that everybody carries. But I think they're not wrong to think that they're, the poet who has really paid attention to language can help you be clearer with things. So they, they're not wrong. It's just that they don't really need us. They want us for like their posters, but they don't really want us to like legislate and help them work those sentences out in the Constitution. Like that's
right.
I mean, poetry is the world's oldest profession. Maybe people feel like we should have just figured something out by now.
We have though. We figured out that language is the supreme medium.
Well, and I mean, all of the best, it makes sense. All of the best political speeches, like all of the best religious, sermons, all of that stuff uses poetry. Like, it's like poets should be writing the speeches. They would inspire people, etc. So, let's see. Do we have any other questions we need to address before we depart for the evening? What is your process in shaping your poems? Do you play with syllabic verse?
Oh. Do you mind if I share the screen again?
No, please. Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Let's see. So this is not one. I don't know. Can you see it? No.
Now.
Oh, good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we see it.
Oh, it's very small. There. Can you see it better now?
Let's see. We can.
So this is. Can you see the cursor when I move it?
No.
Oh. Oh well, maybe I won't show it.
Okay. Did we lose him? We did. Does anyone else do shape poems? Might as well just like address the big elephant in the room.
It sounds like something to try.
I really like the second half of this question also. We're talking about the realm of the now. They also asked, in the midst of societal distress, do you find yourself leaning more towards experimentation or traditional form in your writing?
Sorry, I accidentally shut off, but now can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hi.
So, I started writing poetry in 1975, and all of my poems between 1975 and 2005 are pretty much on the left margin. But when I started using somatic poetry rituals in 2005, it's a very long story about why, but I just feel like it's these spirits around me that I'm writing with. They're just like, we're going to make you sick until you move those poems around. And the more I pushed them into the interior of the page, the better I would feel. That's the thing I was trying to show you, but I just made it simple and told you.
How do you know what the spirits are saying? How do you hear them?
Oh, well, that's the thing I was trying to show you. There were these two dreams that I had. I don't know if they were dreams necessarily, but just as I was waking, these voices that were talking to me saying, we're trying to show you the violence of the human mind, which is something I think about a lot right now since we're all sequestered inside with all these lines. And so the poems just started losing that left margin. And I would literally, when I said I would feel sick, I meant that literally. I would feel nauseous. And I didn't understand why. And I started pushing the lines around, and the more I did it, the better I would feel. And then the voice came again another morning and said, the space between us is the poem, between them and me. It's like transmission, almost like poetry's divination, and then they're bringing in the transmission.
It's so refreshing to hear you say this, because when I say things like this, people look at me and then sometimes they run away.
That's fine. Let them run away.
The idea of being visited.
We're not motivational speakers.
No, but that's right. But to say metaphorically, literally, whatever, that one is visited, is an idea that people simply can't, a lot of people can't deal with. They simply cannot deal with that, for various reasons. So it's such a beautiful thing to hear you say that, and I have to say, to be in the presence of so many people who and I realize how much I've missed it.
Well, I just wanted to say, one of my favorite new books that is like a direct channel is A Sand Book by Ariana. I mean, it hits it right in the middle of that, like an actual transmission and receiver, translator of it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Conrad. But when I can leave the left margin, I think I'll start living.
Oh no. That was, changes things, the way you look at it. So
really push off the key or the K, however you pronounce that word. That's one of those words you don't say aloud. I want to push off from that, you know what?
You have to spell it.
What is the what?
And Alice Notley talks about how she is always saying that all poets are in a trance when we're writing and we're receiving. And do you mind if I talk about one book that she wrote has a very peculiar trance? I think it's amazing. It's Mysteries of Small Houses. And she would put herself into a trance to go into the house that she lived in when she was 4. And when she entered that house, there was a door that she could open, and then she could enter all the other houses she's ever lived in. And when I first saw this book, I've read all of her poetry. And the first time I saw this book, it was confusing because it looked like it was a selected poems. But it wasn't, because she wrote each poem in the style she was writing when she lived in that house. She's visiting in the trance. So it looks like a selected poems, but they're all brand new. But it's a really brilliant book.
Do you know what I would add to that? Again, the idea of the transmission. I also talk about listening. So when people don't know what we're talking about, to go to Paul's point, I say a lot of it is not only that there are always frequencies going, but for me, it is mostly just trying to listen. So sometimes you say, I'm just trying to listen to myself and see if I say a thing that I believe. I think that the writing process is like that for me, certainly. And even in the revision process, it's like testament, like in your heart of hearts when it's right. And sometimes you have to pass the line, 3 times before you're really honest with yourself about whether it works. But that idea of receiving it, when I say to everybody else, like we're all antenna, but some of us are just listening more earnestly or more intensely than others, but everybody has a capacity for it. And so in a moment like this, what you're really saying to everybody is like, make some time just to hear yourself. There's all these other noises so that you can't hear the transmissions. You can't receive the energy that's been passed to you because there's all this other stuff that's in the way. And you're just trying to like literally tune that out and then tune into the thing that you guys are talking about, which I certainly believe is always there for us to hear it or pay attention to it. It's a kind of paying attention.
Absolutely.
I'm curious. Sorry, go ahead. I'm curious about what these transmissions or visitations look like for everyone. Is it something more elusive like intuition, or is it memory? Is it an actual sort of voice that comes to you? Is it a dream? I'm curious about what it looks like.
I think it's sort of a dissociative state when it's happening and you're just watching it happening and trying not to get in the way of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, all of the above.
Mm-hmm.
I think of poets, there are a couple of poets who I feel were imprisoned by this transmission. One is Hannah Wieners. And if you read her book, Clairvoyant Journal, she has these passages where she talks about, if you're not familiar, Hannah Wieners would see words on people's foreheads. And the poet Eileen Myles has this story she tells about, or Eileen goes by they tell, about being at a party in the 70s in New York, crowded party, and Hannah Wieners is across the room. And they think to themselves, Eileen thinks to themselves, I wonder if Hannah sees words on my forehead today. And Hannah looked directly at Eileen and walked over and said, I see no words on your forehead today. So Hannah Wieners was psychic, I guess you would say. But also, but seeing these words was not pleasant. It was a real chore. And Hannah Wieners developed an obsessive compulsive behavior. I hate the word disorder. It's accounting. It's in the book. She would have in her book, Clairvoyant Journal, was like talking about all these words she's saying, and then just say, and now I'm sick of them. And she starts counting 1, 2. Then she does this counting to get rid of the words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can I jump in with that?
Yes, please.
Because with this, all of the above, especially for the people who are here with us, who the thing that's interesting, I'm thinking of what Terrance called shapely thoughts, because none of us invented the language that we're toiling in, and it seems to be moving through us transparently. It's moving through all of us, and of course, it's moving through us through some really bad delivery systems and some sort of all the time, always flowing through us all the time, and this practice of listening, but also the weird practice of reading poems and then trying to write them in different forms and seeing how that does reshape your capacity to witness what's already passing through you. Mm-hmm. But it does turn on this kaleidoscopic experience of your own experience. So I really resonate with what Deborah said about dissociating. There is something about it's that here there is no place that does not see you, and it's the language that's passing through you that somehow will resonate with a sense of truth that you learn to follow. But whether or not, even if you're not having some bombastically psychic or paranormal experience, the more you do this, the more everything starts to resonate with that kind of a sparkle. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes hard to separate getting possessed by a spirit or having, I don't know, some angel from the 4th century talk to you through the Ouija board. It becomes hard to separate that from just like walking down the street and hearing what the people are saying, right behind you. We start to sort of flow into this continuum, and it just becomes a freaky way to live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. I love that. I was thinking earlier, I was looking through all of your work, thinking about things that I like genuinely wanted to ask y'all. And I had this question for CA, which was like, I look at your somatics, and somehow I separate them into 2 modes for me, which is like some of them are social and some of them are like interact with like a tree or a rock. But my guess is for you is that it's all like a little bit social. It's like, you're interacting with the tree or the rock and you're having the experience of the spirit or like the other, and you're getting the voices in all the time. And then it's like, there are these ones that are more social, like bordering on confrontational. And those are the ones that always make me nervous. It's like, go up to these people and say this thing to them or ask them a question. And I was curious if you separate those in your mind at all, or if it's all sort of like one goal.
Well, the original goal of the somatics was to remain present. That's a whole long story, but I mean, I believed that very strongly they could do other things. I did a ritual recently. When I was a teenager in Philadelphia, I had more than half of everybody I knew died of AIDS. And so I did a ritual to contact them, like a necromancy. There's an amazing book, I think it's from the 90s, by Sonia Sanchez called Does Your House Have Lions? And when that book first came out, it just blew my mind because it was her contacting her dead brother who died of AIDS. And it was just riveting from beginning. It's like a real page turner. But I was trying to think, like, now, how can I contact all these people? There's no place we all went. There's no restaurant we all went. There's no beach, park. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I'm thinking too small. Maybe places the other things, like maybe movies. We all saw the movie The Wizard of Oz. So I call it the Wizard of Oz portal. I go to that scene where Dorothy is, she's in that open haze in the poppy field where she's doing, basically the bad witch, so quote unquote bad witch gave her too much heroin from the poppies. And now I freeze the frame and I watch it, look at it with binoculars, and I start invoking the names, bringing the names up and then writing. Because after Dorothy gets out of those poppy fields, she has the solution. That's the turning point in the whole story. When she wakes up, she knows the path out of suffering. I think The Wizard of Oz is a great epic. No.
I agree. I know many poets who would. And on that note, shall we bid each other adieu until next time?
Thank you so much for having me. It was
beautiful. Yes, I'm glad I could get a little bit of this. It's really good to see y'all.
It really is. It's beautiful. It's restorative, and thank you very much indeed for organizing it.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's just a pleasure to talk to all of you. I miss this. I miss being around poets and getting that good conversation out of it. So
thank you for gathering us together.
Certainly.
Well, I miss you all. I hope to see you in the flesh soon. Whenever it happens, it will be a dream come true. And thank you all out there for watching. Come to the New York City Poetry Festival next year. It's really fun.
It's super fun.
And have a great night. Mwah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Good night. Good night, Jackie.
Good night.
It was fun. Let's do it again soon.